Hello! Now, this is a video I've really wanted to do for a long time and I'm only just getting round to doing it. And I've got a gas mask in this video, but this video is not necessarily about respirators. It's about all the logical fallacies I see in YouTube comments constantly, and how you should think about making an argument if you're going to try and argue a point in the comments about something. So this is not just on my videos, this is all over the internet. And if you don't know what a logical fallacy is, Google it. You might learn something really good. I've got a list of logical fallacies here, although that's not the best resolution to read from. But what I want to do is try and almost anecdotally say this is the sort of comments I get about each of the logical fallacies that I'll cover in this video, how I get them in the comments on my videos, and how to argue as a better person and to make better arguments you should try and avoid using logical fallacies. Yeah, now and again they are going to crop up when you make an argument. It's almost unavoidable if you're a human, but you can try and avoid using them and using them in bad faith and whatever else, or if you are going to use them, try and make a good use of them. It'll make more sense as I get onto it. And before I start, there's also arguing in good faith and arguing in bad faith. Everybody should always try and argue in good faith. Basically, the difference is, if you argue in good faith, you're at least listening to the other person's point of views, even if you believe something else. And if somebody, makes a really good point, maybe you'll take that on board and actually learn something from it, and, it's a really good bit of information. So everybody arguing in good faith is always a good thing. It's a bit like the difference between constructive criticism and negative criticism. If you say something about my video I didn't do very well, but you think I could do better on, that's really good. I love constructive criticism. I'll take that on board, even if, it's a bit disappointing that I haven't maybe done a video as good as I thought I would. If you went, that's a crap video, lol, you suck, stop making videos. That's arguing in, well, not arguing in bad sort of logic, but it's negative criticism, and, I don't learn anything from it, so I'm not going to take it on board. And that's like, the difference between arguing in good faith and bad faith. If you argue in bad faith and you have no intention of listening to anybody's arguments and you just, I want to win the argument, I want to win the argument. It doesn't matter about logic or anything else, I want to win the argument. That's arguing in bad faith. So you should always argue in good faith, because you might actually learn some really interesting points of view and, pick up stuff. And when I have people who argue in good faith in the comments and leave constructive criticism and things like that, often I can improve my videos, or somebody will say something I'd have never even thought of regarding a certain topic, and they can have some really good points. Even if I don't agree with them on everything, they can bring up some really good points. For example, I've had people who brought up good points about the M17 I'd never considered before, and cheek filter masks. And while I still think cheek filters are a bad design, they've at least, let me think about some of the positives of a cheek filter design mask. See, that's arguing in good faith or constructive criticism, not arguing in bad faith. So anyway, I'm going to start the list, and then we're going to go through some of the things and examples of them, and hopefully you'll learn something from this video, and it should be a bit of fun. First, we have the straw man. Misrepresenting someone's arguments to make it easier to attack. So this is when somebody makes an argument, and then you make a counter-argument, but rather than you arguing against their points, you misrepresent their points to make it easier to attack their points. So let's say I said cheek filter masks are bad because you can't replace the filters externally, you have to take the mask off and it's really hard to change the filters. Therefore I think it's a bad design for a gas mask. And somebody says, you said that cheek filter masks are bad because cheek filters are completely bad, full stop, therefore, I'm not very good at doing this on the top of my head, but I do see a lot of comments like that, and yeah, that is not a good argument. It's basically where, because somebody makes a good argument that's hard to counter with evidence, you basically misrepresent their argument to, here's a good one. Let's do drinking tubes. So I would say that drinking tubes can be good if implemented properly into respirators, but lots of respirators have poor drinking tube systems that let water and air leak through that can compromise the mask, and it's better to not have a system than have a poorly implemented system. And somebody said, why do you think all drinking tubes are bad? This mask has a good drinking tube. That would be a straw man, pretty much. Slippery slope, this is a common one. It's asserting that if we allow A to happen, then Z will consequently happen too, therefore A should not happen. Now, again, with lots of these, a slippery slope is not necessarily a fallacy if you give lots of examples why it might be the case. But what I see this on a lot is when I'm talking about gun legislation and knife legislation, how I say that, blanket banning things is not good because it's not, it's resolving the underlying problems in society that lead to some of this violence or whatever else. I've seen a lot of people that claim if we completely do anything with our gun laws, if we lax anything in the gun laws. Let's say we make a shotgun permit slightly easier to get hold of, or shotgun permits are slightly cheaper. We have less restrictions on the kind of gun safes. Regardless of what like the argument says, I've had loads of people that say overnight from, you know, having any sort of restriction lifted on firearms in this country will turn into America overnight, and there will be school shootings every day, mass shootings every day. Thousands of people are going to die per year extra because one tiny thing was changed in gun legislation. That's a slippery slope. I'm trying not to make it into a straw man as well, but that's basically the slippery slope problem a lot of people seem to think, is they seem to say, if we do one thing I don't like, then lots of things are going to follow, even if they wouldn't. Says that. Special pleading, this is one I like. Moving the goalposts or making up exceptions when a claim is shown to be false. This is probably the most common one I see in the comments. Somebody will make an argument, I will counter that argument by saying something, and then somebody will claim that was never the argument they were trying to make, or they will change their argument a bit, and it will keep moving until it's impossible eventually to counter-argue. When people start moving the goalposts after a while, I know they're arguing in bad faith, and I don't, keep replying. But that's where somebody will say something about something with a gas mask, for example. For me, I will say, well, that's not really true. You see, this is like a GP5 thing. It's people say, like, GP5 filters don't contain asbestos, link them to all the asbestos reports. Oh, but that was only done on a percentage of GP5 filters. The ones after a certain date are fine. You then link them to a report from, like, 1990 or 1991. Okay, then all the GP5 type filters made after the Soviet Union collapse were safe. Or GP5 filters only contain 1% asbestos, so that's safe. You then link to somebody an article about how, inhalation of any amount of asbestos is bad because it causes permanent lung damage. Oh, no, only 1% isn't really, dangerous. Or it's like that. It's where they lose the initial argument and then they keep making more and more desperate arguments to try and keep their point valid. Moving the goalposts, as I said, is probably the most common one I see on here, and it is really frustrating when somebody makes an argument, you counter their exact argument, prove them wrong, then they change what they're trying to argue. The problem with YouTube as well is people can edit their comments. So what can happen is somebody will make a dodgy argument, you counter the argument, then they edit their original comment to try and claim something else as an original argument, and they go, no, you didn't even argue about what I was trying to argue, you strawman me. And that's really pathetic and, dumb. The black or white fallacy. Now, this is one I run into quite a bit as well. When two alternative states are presented as they are only possibilities when in fact more possibilities exist. So this, for example, is like the one that gas masks expire the second they go over their expiration date and become useless, or all surplus respirators work. Both of those are false statements, but a lot of people make you believe they're the only two statements available. As said, something like that is, the truth lies in the middle, that respirators expire when the weakest part eventually fails on them, and that could be any point, and that could even happen before the expiration date first wears out, and some masks can be surplus for years and years and years and still work. Same sort of logic with filters. Obviously, once a filter's out of its expiration date, it's an indefinite lifespan, you don't know how long it's going to last. It's guaranteed to last inside its expiration date if sealed. Once it goes outside of that, you don't know when it's going to work. Some people will argue that filters never expire and never go off, which is false. Again, the truth is somewhere that once out the date, the filter could still work, but there's no guarantees on it, so I wouldn't trust your life on it. Appeal to authority, here's another good one. Using the opinion or position of an authority figure or institution of authority in place of an actual argument. So this is when somebody says, I know somebody that does this, I have experience with this, therefore you are wrong and I'm not going to actually make an argument. I get that a lot. The amount of people who claim to have been scientists who have watched my videos, nuclear, biological, chemical specialists, mask manufacturers, all this sort of stuff that say, you are wrong because I am an expert in this field, or I know somebody who's an expert in this field and you are wrong, not presenting an argument. If you're an expert in the field, you can leave an argument and tell me why I'm wrong about something. You don't simply say, I am an expert, you're wrong, and then they go into a circular logic argument, which is another fallacy, where I am right because I say I am right, therefore I am right because I say I am right, and, loop that, which is really annoying. So, that's another thing, appeal to authority. That's not to say that a scientist can't be right, and obviously I'm not trying to imply that at all, but they have to present actual arguments for why they say something is true to be true, not simply, I am in this position, therefore I am right. I also need to stress this to other people. If you share my videos to try and win an argument on an internet forum, that in itself doesn't win an argument. Like, I can be wrong about things. I guess my authority on gas masks is I have so many in my collection, therefore, from experience of looking at the masks and parts, I can learn things about them. That does not mean I am 100% right about things all the time. A lot of the information I find on masks I have to try and dig around online for, because if it's a foreign mask with very little information on it, I'm not going to find much out about it. So occasionally, yeah, I am wrong about things. If I know I'm wrong, I would admit to being wrong about them. But quite often people use me as an authority figure when I really shouldn't be. Weapons and Stuff 93 said something, therefore it is true. Yeah, I try and make all my arguments and stuff in good faith, but occasionally, yeah, I am wrong. Don't use me as an authority figure all the time. Because I say something is true doesn't mean it's true all the time, because I might be wrong. And the same thing, if somebody argues a point against me, they will have to come up with evidence, not simply say, I have experience in this field, therefore you're wrong, and I'm not going to present an argument. So yeah, appeal to authority is quite a common fallacy I see when people use them against me, or people actually use me, saying he has a big gas mask collection, therefore he's right on everything related to respirators. I'm really not. Ad hominem, probably the most famous one on the internet. Attacking your opponent's character or personal traits instead of engaging with their argument. This is normally always done in an insulting way, but ad hominem is basically where you don't like the person, therefore their argument can't be true because they made it. If we take this to the logical extreme, if Hitler said something that was true, you know, like 2 + 2 = 4, that's true regardless of Hitler saying it. If you don't like Hitler, which doesn't surprise me, it's still a wrong, you know, it's still a correct point. Somebody's argument should be weighed up on the argument itself, not the person making it. I get, you know, lots of personal insults, you are wrong because you are wrong. One personal trait is interesting, because I get a lot of people that say you're autistic or Asperger, therefore you're wrong. Yeah, I do actually have legitimate autism, but because I have autism is why I have a massive interest in respirators, and I think that makes me right more than wrong, because I actually have a lot of experience working with them. Not trying to go back to the appeal to authority fallacy, but, you know, saying something, you don't like something about the person, therefore their argument is wrong, is completely false. Arguments have to be weighed personally on what the argument is. Because you don't like the person doesn't mean that the argument, you know, is good or bad. So yeah, ad hominem, attacking somebody personally rather than doing it. Now, an ad hominem can sometimes not be a fallacy. Where it's not a fallacy is, let's say a surplus seller says GP5 filters don't contain asbestos. That, if you said they're a surplus seller, therefore they're misrepresenting data or lying because they're trying to make a sale for all these filters they have in stock, that wouldn't be an ad hominem, because that is literally why they're doing it. An ad hominem is when you basically groundlessly use an insult or something you don't like about a person's character to attack something that has nothing to do with the argument. If I was trying to sell something to you and I was misrepresenting the thing I was selling to try and make a sale, then and you called that out, that wouldn't be an ad hominem. The bandwagon, this is a bit like appeal to authority. Appealing to popularity or the fact that many people do something as an attempt to form a validation. So again, this is a bit like GP5 filters don't contain asbestos. Loads of people wore GP5 filters and were fine, therefore they don't contain asbestos. I'm not going to go into this one too much, but it should be obvious. Just because lots of people do something doesn't make it right. Yeah, and again, lots of people say the Soviets stopped using asbestos after a certain year with no proof as to that they did, therefore they didn't use it. You know, if the Soviet Union was doing it, it must have been right. The Soviet Union did lots and lots of horrible and just bad things. I don't think we can ever use the Soviets as a good example of people doing stuff in good faith. So yeah, bandwagon, I won't go into it too much as said, but because something's popular doesn't mean it's correct. Begging the question, and this is the circular argument one I mentioned earlier, a circular argument in which the conclusion is included in the premise, and this is often where somebody kind of says, I am right from my own argument, I am not going to argue points, I am right, therefore I am right. It can be often more complicated than that, but I'll see that a lot in a question or comment where somebody will claim something, not have any evidence to back up the claim, and then they will basically just keep circularly saying, I'm right because I'm said I'm right because my argument says this and therefore I'm right, you know, and it's just a circular thing. So yeah, begging the question or circular argument, you need evidence to back up your argument. You can't say something is right because I say it is right. Appeal to emotion, I had one of these this morning, funnily enough. Manipulating an emotional response in place of a valid or compelling argument. I see this a lot on gun control debates and things like this. And the logic is, if somebody you know got shot or stabbed, you'd feel sad, therefore we should ban guns. You need to look at these things statistically. somebody brought this up in the zombie knife thing. Funnily enough, they said, if a relative of yours was the one person that got killed by a zombie knife, therefore the ban is justified because you'd have felt sad, but you should also kill yourself for being such a horrible person. I find it funny that they've contradicted themselves, saying the death of any person's bad and you should feel, bad for them, but you should kill yourself. I should kill myself because I made an argument and they didn't like it. Yeah, appeal to emotion is really dodgy. It's basically where you use emotions rather than actual arguments. So, again, yeah, it's if statistically something, only killed one person, the other thing killed 10 people, and somebody said, well, both are bad because one person died and that person had a family who feels sad, that would be an appeal to emotion. It's kind of like how nobody ever brings cars up when there's all these gun control debates and things like that, because more people die on the roads any year than anything else, but nobody ever logically says we should ban cars, even if cars and trucks are used in terrorist attacks. It's an appeal to emotion because it's easier with guns to say, look how sad it is this person got shot. Why do we have personal freedoms? Let's let the government stomp all over us. They can keep us safe. It's all that sort of stuff. Appeal to emotion. A good argument can make an emotional response, but you don't use the emotion instead of an argument. Making people feel sad or happy isn't an argument in itself. Right, let's just go over a couple more before we finish. Burden of proof. This is one that comes up loads. Saying that the burden of proof lies not with the person making the claim, but with someone else to disprove. So, for example, if we had a filter and we have no information on if it's safe or not, for example, originally I would hold the perspective that GP5 filters don't contain asbestos, because the burden of proof would be on somebody to prove they do. Now we have overwhelming burden of proof that says GP5 filters contain asbestos. The burden of proof would be to disprove that a lot of them don't. And this is where you have the problem of somebody saying, well, I have a GP5 filter and I'm fine, so, you have to prove that all GP5 filters contain asbestos, not just 100% of the ones tested so far. So yeah, burden of proof is basically where the person who should have to present evidence and make a good argument to something is actually saying everybody else has to make the evidence to why they're wrong, not, the person making the claim. You can look up all these fallacies if you want to and find out loads of information on them. People explain them far better than I do, but yeah. Like, burden of proof is something that comes up a lot in the comments, where somebody will make an argument that's contrary to popular belief or common knowledge, and then try and say, I have to prove them wrong, rather than them having to prove their thing right. No true Scotsman. Making what could be called an appeal to purity is a way to dismiss relevant criticism or flaws to an argument. This is the kind of not all fallacy. So, like, not all GP5 filters contain asbestos, or no true GP5 filter contains asbestos. Again, I can't think of any good examples off the top of my head, but it's like where you would say, like, no GP5 filter contains asbestos. Somebody would come up with a list of all the tests done why GP5 filters contain asbestos, and then somebody would say, but no true GP5 filter contains asbestos. No true communist. This is a really good example of this, where somebody will talk about non-stop about how good certain socialist regimes are. People post all the human rights abuses of those regimes, or those regimes failing, like Soviet Union, Communist China, all these, Cambodia, all those. And then somebody say, but they weren't true communists. They love the circular logic of this socialist. I don't know if you notice this, but they'll basically say how great a communist system is until it fails, but then they weren't a true communist state, so that's totally okay. If you read up on Karl Marx, Marx is a really flawed person. His arguments have been proven to be false over and over again. There's no point trying communism, it's just going to end in disaster. You're going to need to not say, no, but it wasn't true communism every time a communist system fails. The amount of people that do that is just ridiculous, but they'll never learn, they keep doing it over and over and over. Anecdotal evidence. Now, sometimes I do anecdotal stuff because, in my opinion, if you've experienced something personally, that's going to weigh pretty heavily on your opinion of it. I originally had a French Citroën C3 car. The C3 went wrong because of a computer fault in it. The entire car was rendered useless and I had to sell it, even though the car itself was in really good condition, because the computer failed and Citroën wanted so much money to attempt to fix it, it wasn't worth doing. And as a result of that, I wouldn't buy another Citroën car just because I had really bad customer service from Citroën, and, I'd be a bit not trusting of them. Apparently it happened to a lot of other people as well. But let's say only less than 1% of those cars fail in that way. The majority of the cars obviously don't have that problem, but my car did, so it'd be anecdotal evidence for me to try and bring that up to say it's not true, or whatever, like that. But, for example, personally I will still take anecdotal stuff to, to be quite good examples of a thing. Anyway, my camera's battery's about to die, so I'm going to have to finish the video here, but I hope you found this interesting.